Linda Hazzard believed that fasting was the way to cure all illnesses. Despite not having a medical degree, she was licensed to practice medicine in the state of Washington through a legal loophole. She had an outgoing personality, leading to her practice becoming incredibly successful. Her hold was so strong that one of her patients ignored orders from a physician to stop fasting, but she died 9 days later. Not wanting to draw any more attention to herself, Linda opened a private sanitarium called Wilderness Heights, claiming that she could cure any ailment by starvation. Once she realized that her patients became weak and agreeable during their fasting sessions, she then forced them to sign over their possessions to her. But greed was finally what brought an end to the reign of the Starvation Doctor. Welcome to history's biggest villains. Linda Burfield was born on December 18, 1867 in Carver, Minnesota. By the age of 18, she was married with 2 children, but in 1898, she left her family to pursue her career. She was a firm believer in therapeutic fasting, somehow obtaining a license to practice medicine in Washington despite not having a medical degree. A loophole in a licensing law grandfathered in some practitioners of alternative medicine, which included Linda. She said disease could be cured by fasting, allowing the digestive system to rest and be cleansed, removing impurities from the body. According to her, it could cure anything from toothache to tuberculosis, as the real source of all disease was impure blood brought on by impaired digestion. Linda wrote a book on this subject, claiming to have studied fasting therapy by Dr. Edward H. Dewey. His ideas included the no breakfast plan, which involved skipping breakfast and only eating 2 meals a day. He believed all diseases and medical issues were caused by excessive eating, while long periods of fasting could even cure mental illnesses like insanity. While his ideas were trendy in the early 20th century, most medical experts considered it nonsense. But Linda was convinced that reading Dr. Dewey's books gave her the answers she needed. In addition to the fasting, Linda added her own elements, which included daily enemas, sometimes lasting for hours and using up to 12 quarts of water. The third part of her therapy was called pummeling, a treatment that involved Linda beating her fists against the patient's forehead and back, chanting, "Eliminate, eliminate." She purchased an ad in the newspaper for her practice, and she had quite a few takers. One of Linda's first victims was Gertrude Young in 1902. Gertrude was seeking a cure for the partial paralysis of her left arm and leg due to a stroke. Linda knew just a trick to cure her of her mobility issues, a 40-day fast. Desperate for any type of cure, Gertrude started to fast. She had a friend stay with her at her apartment during the treatment, while Linda or another nurse would periodically come by to provide instructions. Gertrude wasn't allowed to eat food, but she could drink small amounts of liquid, such as a half cup of tomato broth or strained orange juice, when Linda allowed it. On day 30, Gertrude was found shaking, sweating, and vomiting a dark substance. Linda simply told her to open the windows despite the freezing temperatures outside, saying it would keep the air fresh, but this only made her nausea worse. Gertrude's friend became extremely concerned after she lost a large amount of weight. She finally caved and took her to an actual doctor, the same one that saw her for her pain a few months back. He immediately told her to stop fasting, as it clearly wasn't a cure for her paralysis. He told her friend to slowly introduce things like bone broth and soft foods until her stomach could handle more solid foods. However, Gertrude was so convinced by Linda's methods that she ignored the doctor and continued to fast. On the 39th day, she died. Linda wasn't charged for her death because technically, Gertrude could have broken her fast and received proper medical care on her own, but she chose not to. When investigators asked what had happened to her rings and necklaces, Linda's answers were evasive. In 1904, Linda married the man of her dreams, Samuel Crispin Hazzard. He was a West Point graduate, but he ruined his military career by embezzling Army funds. He hadn't even divorced his previous wife when he chose to marry Linda. This started a highly publicized trial for bigamy, which saw Samuel serve 2 years in prison. Once he got out in 1906, the couple set out for Washington State to start over. Linda began practicing in Seattle, commuting by ferry from a 40-acre spread in the town of Olalla. She named Wilderness Heights. Several locals embraced Linda's medical theories and came to visit her. One of them was her first known Washington victim, Daisy Maud Haglund, a Norwegian whose immigrant parents once owned Alki Point. After a 50-day fast under Linda's direction, she died on February 26, 1908 at age 38. She left behind a 3-year-old son, Ivar, who would go on to make his name and fortune feeding millions of people as the owner of successful seafood restaurants. Other victims soon followed: Ida Wilcox in 1908, Blanche B. Tyndall and Violet Heaton in 1909, and Mrs. Maud Whitney in 1910. When civil engineer Earl Erdman underwent treatment in 1911 and died of starvation 3 weeks later, the Seattle Daily Times headline read, "Women, MD, kills another patient. Earl's diary provided an insight as to how he was treated. February 1st, saw Dr. Hazzard and began treatment on this date. No breakfast. Mash soup dinner. Mash soup supper. February 5th through 7th, 1 orange breakfast. Mash soup dinner. Mash soup supper. February 8th, 1 orange breakfast. Mash soup supper. Mash soup dinner. February 9th through 11th, 1 orange breakfast. Strained soup dinner. Strained soup supper. February 12th, 1 orange breakfast. 1 orange dinner. 1 orange supper. February 13th, 2 orange breakfast. No dinner. No supper. February 14th, 1 cup of strained tomato broth at 6 p.m. February 15th, 1 cup hot strained tomato soup night and morning. February 16th, 1 cup hot strained tomato soup a.m. and p.m. Slept better last night. Head quite dizzy. Eyes yellow streaked and red. February 17th, ate 3 oranges today. February 19th, called on Dr. Dawson today at his home. Slept well Saturday night. February 20th, ate strained juice of 2 small oranges at 10 a.m. Dizzy all day. Ate strained juice of 2 small oranges at 5 p.m. February 21st, ate 1 cup settled and strained tomato broth. Backache today, just below ribs. February 22nd, ate juice of 2 small oranges at 10 a.m. Backache today in right side, just below ribs. February 23rd, slept but little last night. Ate 2 small oranges at 9 a.m. Went after milk and felt very bad. Ate 2 small oranges at 6 p.m. February 24th, slept better Wednesday night. Kind of frontal headache in a.m. Ate 2 small oranges at 10 a.m. Ate 1.5 cups of hot tomato soup at 6 p.m. Heart hit up to 95 beats per minute and sweat considerable. February 25th, slept pretty well Thursday night. Ate 1.5 cups tomato broth 11 a.m. Ate 1.5 cups tomato broth 6 p.m. Pain in right below ribs. February 26th, did not sleep so very well Friday night. Pain in right side just below ribs and back. Pain quit at night. Ate 1.5 cups tomato broth at 10:45 a.m. Ate 2.5 pumped small oranges at 4:30 p.m. Felt better afternoon than for the last week. Even though there were several reports of people dying under her care, patients kept on coming. Frank Southard, a law partner in the firm of Morris, Southard and Shipley, and C.A. Harrison, publisher of the Alaska Yukon magazine, both visited the sanitarium. They both died a few months later, along with Ivan Flux, an Englishman who had come to America to buy a ranch, having fasted for 53 days. During this time, Linda got control of some of his cash and property, as his family was told that he died with only $70 to his name. Authorities tried to step in when Lewis Ellsworth Rader, a former legislator and magazine publisher, began wasting away. Linda treated him at the Outlook Hotel in 1911, and health inspectors tried to convince him to leave, but he refused. She then took him away to a secret location where the 5'11" man died weighing less than 100 pounds. Seattle's health director couldn't intervene since Linda was licensed, and patients were willing participants in her deadly therapy. Linda had a commanding personality, earning many loyal followers, as some patients were afraid of her, not having the courage to disobey. The health director still kept an eye on her in case she treated any children, as at that point he would step in. But the pattern was becoming familiar, as patients were put up in Seattle hotels or in cabins on Linda's Olalla property. Autopsy reports listed starvation as the cause of death, unless Linda performed an autopsy, as of course, anything but starvation appeared as the cause of death. There was an exception though. In 1909, 26-year-old Eugene Stanley Wakeland's decomposing body was found on the Hazzard's property. This son of a British lord had died as a result of a bullet to the head, a presumed suicide. Linda had power of attorney over his estate, and she sent a telegram to his lawyer, complaining that she needed more of his funds to pay for his bill at the mortuary. Later, the British Vice Consul in Tacoma speculated that he was shot by the Hazzards, who were frustrated to learn that despite his aristocratic family, he wasn't rich. Dorothy and Claire Williamson were a pair of sisters in their early 30s. While visiting Victorian British Columbia, they read an ad for Hazzard's book in a Seattle newspaper. They ordered it and also received her brochure promoting her Institute of Natural Therapeutics in Olalla. They arrived at Linda's office in February 1911, choosing not to tell relatives, as the family was already scornful in their interest in unorthodox medicine. Since they were both in control of a large estate, this was a huge financial opportunity for Linda. Since the sanitarium wasn't ready yet, she would treat them in Seattle. The sisters settled in at the Buena Vista apartments under the care of one of Linda's osteopathic nurses. They survived mostly on a thin vegetable broth. Linda arrived regularly to provide hours-long enemas and pummeling massage, also beginning to ask questions about the sisters' business affairs, and offered to store their diamond rings and real estate deeds in her office safe. By April, the sisters were emaciated and losing their minds. They were barely able to walk, even slipping in and out of consciousness during the baths and enemas. They were transferred to Alala by ambulance, but not before Linda's private attorney obtained a signature from Claire. It was in addition to her will leaving a monthly stipend of £25 per year to the Hazzard's Institute, adding that in case of death, she wanted her body cremated under the charge and direction of Linda Hazzard, because of course. On the 30th, the Williams' childhood nanny Margaret Conway received a cryptic telegram summoning her to visit them in Alala. Margaret hopped on a ferry from Sydney, Australia, arriving in Seattle after a week. Samuel met the boat and took Margaret to Linda's Seattle office. There, she was told that Claire was dead and Dorothy was insane. She was then taken to the mortuary and shown a sickly thin body that she didn't recognize. Apparently, it was Claire, who weighed less than 50 pounds at the time of her death. Afterwards, she was taken to Alala to see Dorothy, who is now a human skeleton living alone in a dilapidated cabin no better than a shack. Dorothy immediately begged to be taken away, but the next day she reversed her statement and insisted that the cure was working wonders. Margaret stayed with Dorothy, hoping to convince her to leave. She tried to sneak some rice into her main source of nutrition, which is a broth made from canned tomatoes. Although the patients were usually separated from each other, they were all let out during a 4th of July celebration. 2 of them approached Margaret and begged her to get them out, saying they were prisoners. Margaret also noticed that Linda was wearing Claire's silk dressing gown and her favorite hat. She learned that Dorothy had given the Hazzards power of attorney and helped themselves to some of her funds. When she told Linda that she would be leaving and taking Dorothy with her, Linda said that Dorothy wasn't free to leave, as the Hazzards had obtained a legal guardianship of Dorothy, affirming that she would be spending the rest of her life with them. Margaret snuck off the property to send a telegram to the sisters' uncle in Portland, and he came to rescue them. The treatment had reduced Dorothy down to a 60-pound skeleton. Linda presented her with a bill of $2,000, saying that they wouldn't allow her to leave without some cash, but her uncle negotiated a smaller ransom. The British Vice Consul in Tacoma brought pressure on Kitsap County to prosecute Linda. When they said they couldn't afford it, Dorothy offered to pay for the prosecution. In August 1911, Linda was arrested. As the Tacoma Daily News headline read, "Officials expect to expose starvation atrocities. Dr. Hazzard depicted as fiend." Linda said that she was being persecuted because she was a successful woman, and that a group of traditional doctors resented her success and opposed natural cures. She told reporters, "I intend to get on the stand and show up that bunch. They've been playing checkers, but it's my move. I'll show them a thing or two when I get on the stand." However, her lawyer kept her off the stand, but the judge scolded her for signaling to witnesses. Besides incriminating medical testimony, a complete paper trail, including a forged diary entry saying Claire wanted Linda to have her diamonds, made it clear that the Hazzards had criminal intent. Linda's outspoken nature had inspired women from across the Northwest, and hundreds flocked to the trial. One reporter tallied 248 women in the line, the wives of Navy officers, society women, even some female private detectives. Linda prayed to the crowd like a politician on the stump, as during a court recess, she shouted, "I am a great believer in women and will defend members of my sex at all times. I would willingly place my fate in the hands of a jury of women at any time." John Igver Hagelin testified that even though his wife Daisy had been Linda's first Washington victim, he had faith in her, even taking his son to get treated 3 times a week. Prosecuting attorney Thomas Stevenson called Linda a financial starvationist and a serpent who tried sly and stealthy, yet with all her craft lay a trail of slime. After the judge denied any of her former patients the opportunity to testify, it was clear from the outset that Linda was in serious trouble. The prosecution had plenty of ammo, as Stevenson proved that she had written Claire's will. The last entry of Claire's diary, written the day she died, had also been forged. Throughout the 3-week trial, each day was marked with some spectacular moment. Linda was reprimanded repeatedly by the judge for coaching and signaling to defense witnesses, as one was even accused of trying to bribe a former sanitarium nurse. The vice consul's home was robbed, and Claire's trunk of personal papers was ransacked. Police speculated that the culprit was one of Linda's zealous supporters. In the end, she lost and was convicted of manslaughter. The press theorized that if she had been a man, the verdict would have been murder. Linda somehow managed to kill 2 more patients while awaiting sentencing, as she eventually served just 2 years in the state penitentiary in Walla Walla. After her release, she and Sam moved to New Zealand, where she operated under the titles of physician, dietitian, and osteopath, also publishing another book. In 1917, a local newspaper reported that Linda held a practicing certificate from the Washington State Medical Board. Because she used the title doctor, she was charged in Auckland for practicing medicine without a license, being found guilty and fined $600 New Zealand dollars. By 1920, she made enough money to come back to Alala, finally building her dream sanitarium at Starvation Heights. Since the state of Washington had pulled her medical license, she called it a school of health. The lavish building included a basement autopsy room where Linda continued her deadly starvations. The sanitarium burned down in 1935, and 3 years later, Linda died. She hadn't been feeling well and had embarked on a fasting cure, but she got a taste of her own medicine. Today, her books can still be found in natural healing bookstores in a downloadable form on the internet. The total number of her victims is unknown, but she can safely be said to have starved at least 12 people to death. Man, this whole story is just ridiculous because it's just you make a whole starvation camp. But the crazy part is these people are willing to do this. This is people volunteering to be a part of this camp. Like, she's not holding a gun to people's head and forcing them to do it. Like, she's really putting ads in the paper and people are just responding to the ads. Like, she's someone selling a business. This case was just weird because I don't think anyone before or since has ever tried anything like this ever. Thanks to everybody for watching. I really appreciate y'all for the support. Leave a like, hit that subscribe button. I'm out. Peace.